speaker. And yeah, maybe not so many know that Chris also was part of the CHEMP team and Med Office team before he went to Eumetsat.
Thank you. I'm the last one before the dinner and the banquet, so I try to make it short. So let's skip that. That figure brought me into radio occultations. In 1997, I finished my PhD thesis at the Free University of Berlin in Karen Labitzke's stratospheric research group. Karen Labitzke, together with Scherhag in the 50s, was instrumental in discovering major stratospheric warmings in the Northern Hemisphere. She had a rather conservative research group, which took up modeling in the stratosphere later on. And at some point, and that must have been in 1998, probably, I guess, she came to me after a conference and I was working in my PhD thesis about the quasi-biennial oscillations. That's a 2 to 3 year wind reversal in the tropical lower stratosphere. And for a long time, it wasn't clear what was driving that. GCMs couldn't reproduce it at all. Even in data assimilation systems at that time, it wasn't present. And there was the idea that must have been tropical planetary waves. That was a Linson and Houghton paper. And then it turned out it was gravity waves that probably played a major role. And then she came back from this conference and she said, well, there is Toshitaka Tsuda who has used data from a new measurement technique from a satellite that was GPS something. And he came up with a global distribution of gravity wave activity. And that's this picture. I think the paper came out in 2000. And she had seen that on a conference, and she knew him from her time at ENCA, where she was. And then she came to me and said, just after I'd finished my PhD thesis and was thinking about what to do afterwards, she was saying, you know, this seems to be interesting, look into it. And by the way, there is this group at GFZ, or there is GFZ at Potsdam, Chris Reichber, and they are going to fly a satellite and that will have this kind of instrument and maybe that's interesting. So I talked with Chris Reichber, and what I didn't, and he hired me for doing the atmospheric stuff with CHEMP, it turned out. And what I didn't know at the time, that there were some political things going on between DLR and GFZ Potsdam, which Chris Reichber had used to get a better position. And the first job he gave me was go to DLR in Neustrelitz and find out what these guys are doing with the retrievals. Okay, so I was young and naive, and I went there and thought, well, I asked them what they are doing. And then I met Jens for the first time and Clemens Hocke, and they hated me from day one. Because, you know, I was this guy, this Western guy coming into East Germany and asking them what they were doing after they had spent years on developing their software and their stuff. So we didn't have a good start. They had to move to Potsdam. Thorsten, what was Thorsten's second name? Yeah, he came later to Potsdam, and even later Georg Beierle joined that team. We found our way together, I think, and we managed to get profiles out. I was then doing water vapor retrievers, and I didn't like the idea of using a second order polynomial to represent the temperature profile throughout the entire stratosphere. So I was starting to read papers on how retrievals are done. And then that must have been in 2000, I believe. At a conference in Birmingham, I ran over a tall guy who was very nice with the name of Sean Healy. And we talked for about half an hour, and I said, well, I want to go to the Met Office and learn how it's really done. In 2002, I started to work at the Met Office, learning about data assimilation, not doing any data assimilation in the end, although I produced a picture for this very first paper on, you know, CHEMP data assimilation in the UK Met Office model. And that's why they put me on the paper, and I really haven't done anything before that. But, you know, Sean is very nice and all that. So after that, I think I was there for 3 months or so, and the Met Office was going to move from Bracknell, which was not very beautiful, but anyway, to Exeter, which was very beautiful. And then he told me, oh, by the way, I've applied to the European Center, and I got the job there. And then I was suddenly alone with all this radio occultation work at the Met Office. Okay, and then Sean went on and demonstrated that even CHEMP data has an impact in the ECMWF system, which nobody believed at the time. And then later on, he showed with Cosmic 2 how important that was after the mission was launched. At the Met Office, I met Axel von Engel, who had also worked in radio occultation a little bit before. So we both had wives who wanted to go back to Germany, and they had spent years in a foreign country with us somehow, but they didn't want to stay there. So we both applied for jobs elsewhere. And I was the first to get one at Eumetsat, I think in late 2005, and he joined Eumetsat a few months later. And then suddenly we were at Eumetsat, and after I've been listening to talks this afternoon from Eric, for example, I think Eumetsat must be the total antithesis to how you got GPS MET and Cosmic up into space. Because Eumetsat works on the idea of having big programs. You do 10 years of preparations and planning and requirement gathering, and then we bring that in front of our member states. We have 30 of them, and then the program is presented and member states think about it. They think about how much money they want to spend over the next 20 years, and then they agree to it or not. In 1995, that was a time when member states had to approve EPS, the METOP satellites. And in 1995, I looked it up this morning. So there was an EPS program proposal, and that had many instruments on board. YASI, microwave passive sounder. There was no RO, of course not. And then there was this red part. In late 1995, so that was the same year the GPS MET was launched, and there wasn't even a paper out about results. There is a line in the minutes of a joint meeting of the 28th Council meeting. Council is a gathering of the 30 member states where the real decisions are taken. And it says something like inclusion of new instruments for climate, in addition to meteorology, was important to Denmark. GPS atmospheric sounding should be considered as an addition to the joint proposal. Denmark means Per Høeg and DMI. And Per Høeg, as you have heard from Stig, was working very closely with Gottfried Kirchengast in Europe, and with ESA, Pierluigi Silvestrini. And I believe it was the three of them, among them others, somehow got their weather centers to come up with that proposal. And because Eumetsat praises itself as being a user-driven organization, meaning if the users ask for it at that level, it will be implemented. There is now GRASS, and otherwise it wouldn't have been there. So without GPS MET and some dedicated people in Europe who knew about that and who worked in the field, we wouldn't have GRASS, and in Europe there would be no RO, I'm pretty sure of that. In that same council meeting, they stripped down the EPS satellite quite a bit. Several instruments went off because it was becoming too expensive, but GRASS stayed. And we are very happy about that, of course. So after that, one thing I wanted to mention that, you have heard about the ROMSAF. The SAFs are something created by Eumetsat to spread money back to the member states and have scientific expertise supporting Eumetsat in whatever we are doing. And both Axel and I were, we had been working at the Met Office, so we were part of the ROMSAF. So we had seen the other side, how Eumetsat dealt with the SAFs. And we were not particularly happy. And I remember when we were both at Eumetsat, we were talking about how do we want to have that relationship with the ROMSAF building out. And we started at some point to say, well, we want to have a real collaboration. We do not want to be in the state that Eumetsat is sitting there giving the money, making requests, do this, do that. We want to have something better than that. And that brings me to my last slide, because for me, the example really was UCA and how you have built a community of radio occultations with GPS MET and Cosmic. I wasn't there from the beginning, but what I experienced when I came to GFZ Potsdam, we could use GPS MET data to prepare a CHEMP because you were giving them to us or you were making it available. Somehow people in UCA, and it starts with Rick Anthis and Bill Kuo and Chris Rocken, later on Bill Schreiner, Sergei Sokolovsky, whenever you ask a question, you will get an answer. Doug Hunt helping with technical things and also with other ones. So we got, I think you built a community around radio occultation that, defined how open cooperation can work. Of course, there is competition, and teasing each other sometimes, is part of the fun of the work we do. But there also was always cooperation. There was a friendly welcome to new people. There was a willingness to help, to explain why it's happening. So I think you have demonstrated really, at least to me, how a community can work, a scientific community. And I mean, I have been occasionally in my life, I have been in other communities, and I still do that with Eumetsat when we are looking at other instruments, and the amount of bickering and fighting among people, sometimes it can be terrible in science. But in this radio occultation community, I'm very happy that I could spend most of my scientific career in this place, because it is a friendly place. It's a good place. And I think the community benefits from that as well. The openness, the exchange helps everyone to improve and to get better. And that's great. And I want to thank you for that. And as I said, when Axel and I sat together many years ago, 20 years or so ago it is now for us, we thought about, we want to have that in Europe as well. And that is why we started to try to work with the ROMSAF. So if we succeeded in that, that's something the ROMSAF people have to decide and to judge upon. I have the idea that it's working quite well. I'm very happy in that. And UCA has been the example for that as well on a very personal level. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chris, also for your really great words at the end. I hand over to Rick for the final remarks.
Closing remarks. Let's party. Now listen, I started this by running over, and then